Welcome. What you are about to watch is not science fiction, and it is not folklore. It is a serious investigation into one of history's most compelling unresolved questions: the mystery of the Olmec Heads, colossal stone portraits of people who have no known origin. Across the world, in universities, research institutes, and field excavations, serious scholars are wrestling with evidence that does not fit the accepted story. Evidence that has been documented, measured, and peer-reviewed, and that still has no satisfying conventional explanation. We are going to look at that evidence carefully, without prejudice in either direction, not dismissing what is extraordinary, but not accepting it without scrutiny either. The truth, as always, is in the details. In the jungles of Mexico, 17 colossal stone heads have been found, carved from volcanic basalt, each weighing up to 40 tons. They are clearly portraits of specific individuals. Each face is unique. They were made by the Olmec, the first civilization in the Americas, about whom almost nothing is known. The faces on the heads do not look like Native Americans. That observation, made by observers since the heads were first excavated in the 19th century, has generated one of the most controversial debates in New World archaeology. The Olmec created the first complex society in the Americas, possibly the first writing system, and possibly the earliest calendar. They quarried and transported 40-ton boulders across 80 kilometers of swampland, and then they disappeared, leaving behind 17 stone faces that look, to some viewers, like no one from the ancient Americas should look. The mainstream answer is clear. The alternative answer is not going away. Who are the people in the Olmec Heads? This is where our investigation begins. Stay with us, because the further we go into the evidence, the more extraordinary it becomes. The story you think you know is only the surface. Beneath it lies something far more remarkable. Let us begin. Before we examine the specific evidence, we need to step back and understand the context. This case does not exist in isolation. It sits within the global puzzle of unexplained ancient construction, and to properly evaluate what we are looking at, we need to understand the broader picture that surrounds it. Catastrophism, the idea that Earth's geological and cultural history has been shaped by sudden, violent events rather than purely gradual processes, was once the dominant paradigm in science. It was then largely displaced by uniformitarianism, the principle championed by Charles Lyell in the 19th century that the present is the key to the past, and that change occurs slowly and continuously. The pendulum has since swung back. Modern geology and astronomy have confirmed that catastrophic events, asteroid impacts, supervolcanic eruptions, rapid climate shifts, have profoundly shaped Earth's surface and life upon it. The Chicxulub impact that ended the Cretaceous is the most famous example, but it is not alone. The Younger Dryas cooling event 12,000 years ago caused radical shifts in human habitat within decades, not millennia. The Bronze Age collapse 3,000 years ago ended multiple interconnected civilizations in a generation. These events matter for archaeology because they reset the evidence. A major catastrophe does not merely destroy a civilization, it destroys the record of that civilization. Survivors carry only what they can remember, and memory degrades with each generation. After a few centuries, the grandchildren of survivors have myths where their grandparents had engineering manuals. What archaeologists find when they excavate ancient sites is not the full picture. It is the fragment that survived the last catastrophe. The full picture may be forever gone, preserved only in the ambiguous traces that puzzle researchers to this day. This context matters because it tells us something important. What we are about to investigate is not an isolated curiosity. It is part of a pattern that researchers in multiple fields have been independently documenting for decades. And patterns in science demand explanation. With that foundation in place, let us now turn to the specific case at hand. Now we reach the heart of the matter. The core evidence surrounding the Olmec Heads, colossal stone portraits of people who have no known origin, is more extensive, more verified, and more troubling for conventional explanations than most people realize. Let us walk through it systematically, fact by fact, and allow the evidence to speak for itself. We are not going to speculate here. Every point that follows is documented in peer-reviewed publications, official archaeological records, or government archives that are publicly accessible. The question is not whether these facts are real. The question is what they mean. Consider this first extraordinary detail. 17 colossal basalt heads have been confirmed across 4 Olmec sites, 10 at San Lorenzo, 4 at La Venta, 2 at Tres Zapotes, and 1 at La Cobata. The largest stands 3.4 meters tall and weighs approximately 40 tons. All are carved from basalt boulders quarried from the Tuxtla Mountains, located 80 to 150 kilometers from the main Olmec sites. The transport of these boulders across swampy lowlands, without wheels or draft animals, is among the most impressive logistical feats of the ancient Americas. This single data point, if taken in isolation, might be set aside. Anomalies happen, instruments malfunction, researchers make mistakes, but as we continue, you will see that this is not an isolated anomaly. It is part of a consistent and documented pattern, but that is only the beginning. Researchers also discovered the Olmec civilization flourished from approximately 1500 to 400 BC. The San Lorenzo heads are the oldest, dated to around 1200 BC. The La Venta heads follow, dated to approximately 900-400 BC. The Olmec are considered the mother culture of Mesoamerica. Archaeological evidence suggests that the Maya, Aztec, and Zapotec civilizations inherited key cultural elements, including the ball game, a specific calendar system, and possibly the earliest writing in the Americ. As from the Olmec, now a skeptic might propose an alternative explanation for this, and that is entirely reasonable. We should always test alternative explanations before accepting extraordinary ones. The problem is that the alternative explanations, when examined carefully, create more problems than they solve. The mystery deepens when we examine each of the 17 heads is unique. The faces are individual portraits, not generic types. Differences in facial structure, expression, and the distinctive helmet designs worn by each figure are specific enough to suggest they represent named individuals, most likely rulers or important ballgame champions. No two helmets are the same. This portrait specificity implies a tradition of commemorative art linked to individual identity, not religious iconography. This is where the conventional account begins to strain. Each individual fact might be dismissed or minimized in isolation, but the cumulative weight of the evidence is another matter entirely. Perhaps most remarkable of all, the Olmec left no deciphered writing system. Symbols found at Olmec sites, including the Cascajal block, a stone tablet with 62 undeciphered symbols found in 2006, may represent the oldest writing in the Americas, predating Maya writing by several centuries. Without a deciphered text, the names, titles, or significance of the individuals portrayed in the colossal heads cannot be determined from Olmec sources. Researchers who have examined this evidence have described it as genuinely difficult to explain within the accepted framework. These are not fringe commentators. They are credentialed academics publishing in mainstream journals, raising questions that the field has not yet satisfactorily answered. Then there is the matter of several of the colossal heads show evidence of having been reworked. Chiseled marks suggest that some heads were carved from pre-existing monuments, possibly throne-like rectangular altars or thrones that were modified into heads at a later date. This recycling pattern implies that the portrait tradition evolved within the culture, or that the original monument was altered as political circumstances changed, possibly following the defeat of the ruler portrayed. What makes this particularly significant is its independence from the previous points. This is not a case of one theory requiring another. These are separate lines of evidence converging on the same uncomfortable conclusion. Adding to the enigma is this finding: genetic studies of modern indigenous Mexican populations and ancient DNA extracted from Olmec-era skeletal remains show no evidence of African, Asian, or other non-American genetic admixture in the ancient Olmec population. The population genetics of ancient Mesoamerica is consistent with the established model of Asian origin migration across the Bering Land Bridge in the Pleistocene, with no subsequent transoceanic contact detectable in the genomic record. Taken together, these facts form a pattern that cannot be explained by coincidence, misidentification, or methodological error. Each piece of evidence has been examined by skeptics. Each has been subjected to alternative explanations, and in each case, the alternative explanation falls short of accounting for everything that has been documented. We are left with a body of evidence that demands explanation and an accepted narrative that does not provide one. This is where serious inquiry begins. Now that we have established the evidence, we need to examine the theories that researchers have proposed to explain the Olmec Heads, colossal stone portraits of people who have no known origin. This is where the debate becomes most intense, because the theories reflect not just different interpretations of the same evidence, but fundamentally different assumptions about what is possible and what the past looked like. Understanding these theories is not just an academic exercise. Each one has been championed by serious researchers with genuine credentials, and each one captures something that the others miss. The truth, if it is ever established, will likely draw on elements of several. The first major explanation proposed by researchers holds that the mainstream archaeological interpretation holds that the colossal heads are portraits of Olmec rulers or elite individuals, possibly ballgame champions, given the helmet's resemblance to protective headgear. The facial features are interpreted as within the normal range of variation for ancient Mesoamerican populations, with stylistic conventions of Olmec sculptural art accounting for the broad noses and full lips. This interpretation is supported by the genetic evidence and has no credible competing evidence against it. This interpretation has significant academic support and is backed by substantial evidence, but it is not without problems. Critics point out that it requires assumptions that go beyond what the evidence strictly supports, and that key predictions of this theory have not been confirmed by subsequent research. It remains contested, and the contest is productive. A rival school of thought argues that Ivan van Sertima, in his 1976 book, They Came Before Columbus, argued that the facial features of the colossal heads represent West African individuals, and that Malian seafarers reached Mexico around 700 BC and were commemorated by the Olmec. This theory was widely publicized in Afrocentric scholarship, but has been rejected by virtually all archaeologists on the grounds that no African artifacts have been found in Olmec sites, and that the genetic evidence shows no African admixture. This theory is controversial, and deliberately so. Its proponents argue that the evidence demands an explanation outside the conventional framework. Critics counter that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and that the evidence presented, while suggestive, does not yet meet that standard. The debate continues in peer-reviewed literature. Perhaps the most unconventional theory suggests that some researchers have proposed that the heads were recycled from earlier full-body Olmec monuments, specifically the large basalt thrones or altars found at Olmec sites, rather than carved as heads from the beginning. Under this model, the head is a reworked portrait that originally depicted a seated figure, and the modifications may have been made after the ruler's death or political defeat. Chiseling marks on several heads are consistent with this interpretation. What is striking about this debate is not merely that experts disagree. That is normal and healthy in science. What is striking is the quality of the disagreement. Serious researchers working from the same body of evidence, reaching genuinely different conclusions. That level of fundamental disagreement, when it persists over decades, is a signal that something important has not yet been understood. The question is not which of these theories is right. The question is whether any of them is right, or whether the truth is something that none of the current frameworks has yet been able to capture. The case surrounding the Olmec heads, colossal stone portraits of people who have no known origin, does not rest on speculation alone. What distinguishes this investigation from pure mythology is the existence of documented, physical, verifiable evidence. material that has been examined by credentialed researchers and whose authenticity is not seriously disputed. What is disputed is its interpretation. Let us review the most significant documented evidence as objectively as possible. We are not going to cherry-pick the data that supports a preferred conclusion. We are going to lay out what exists and let you draw your own assessment. Physical evidence supporting this account includes genomic analysis of ancient Mesoamerican populations, including studies published between 2015 and 2022 using DNA extracted from skeletal remains. Consistently shows no African genetic admixture in any ancient American population predating European contact. This is the most direct refutation of the African contact hypothesis. The genetic record does not support the presence of a genetically distinct population in ancient Mexico that would account for any non-American facial features. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Investigators have documented. Geological analysis has confirmed that all 17 colossal heads were made from basalt, sourced specifically from the Tuxtla Mountains, 80 to 150 kilometers from the main Olmec population centers. The stone was not chosen arbitrarily. Specific outcrops within the Tuxtla Range were selected, and the boulders were transported overland and by raft across difficult terrain. The sourcing confirms deliberate, organized procurement at a scale requiring centralized authority. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. On-site analysis revealed reworking evidence on several of the colossal heads, including chisel marks inconsistent with the primary carving and traces of earlier surface designs beneath the final portrait form, supports the thesis that some heads were carved from pre-existing monuments. This recycling practice has parallels in other Mesoamerican cultures, where monuments were frequently defaced or reworked following political changes, and it provides the most parsimonious explanation for some of the head's unusual proportions. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Each individual piece of evidence might, in principle, be explained away. A single anomalous artifact might be misidentified. A single anomalous date might reflect contamination. A single anomalous eyewitness account might reflect misperception. The question is whether all of the evidence can be explained away, and whether the explanations required are more or less plausible than the evidence itself. When multiple independent lines of inquiry converge on the same conclusion, that convergence is the most powerful signal in empirical science. And that is exactly what we are seeing here. We have examined the history, the evidence, and the theories surrounding the Olmec Heads, colossal stone portraits of people who have no known origin. Now we need to ask the question that is sometimes overlooked in discussions of ancient mysteries. Why does this matter? What does it mean for us today? It would be easy to file this away as an interesting historical curiosity, a puzzle from a distant past with no bearing on our present lives. That would be a fundamental mistake. The questions raised by this case touch on issues that are directly relevant to who we are, where we came from, and what the human story actually looks like before the period covered by conventional history. Ivan van Sertima's African contact theory has been rejected by virtually all working archaeologists and is now excluded from mainstream academic discussion. Genetic studies published through the 2020s have definitively closed the question of African admixture in ancient Mesoamerica. LiDAR mapping of the Olmec heartland in Tabasco and Veracruz continues to reveal the scale of Olmec urban planning. The heads are on display in museums at Jalapa and Villahermosa. The Olmec's foundational role in developing the Mesoamerican calendar system, ball game, and possibly writing is increasingly recognized. The 17 faces remain the most immediate and haunting evidence that the Olmec were a culture of extraordinary individuality, and they remain nameless. Furthermore, the tools available to investigate these questions are advancing rapidly. Satellite imaging, ground-penetrating radar, ancient DNA analysis, isotopic tracing, and deep-sea sonar are all providing capabilities that previous generations of researchers could only dream of. Cases that were genuinely unresolvable 10 years ago are now open to new analysis, and the findings, consistently, are expanding rather than contracting the mystery. The investigation continues. New discoveries are being made. New analyses are being published. New voices are entering the conversation from disciplines that were not previously part of the discussion. The answers, when they come, and they will come, will not merely solve a historical puzzle. They will force a fundamental revision of assumptions that underpin our entire understanding of human history and human potential. We have now walked through the complete case of the Olmec Heads, colossal stone portraits of people who have no known origin, from the historical record, through the physical evidence, across the competing theories, and into the modern significance of what remains unresolved. What the story of Olmec ultimately reveals is not just a historical puzzle. It is a mirror. It reflects our assumptions back at us, our assumptions about what ancient people were capable of, about how knowledge is gained and lost across the centuries, and about the relationship between what we know and what we merely think we know. The evidence presented in this documentary is real. The questions it raises are genuine. The debate among researchers is ongoing, and that is healthy. Science is not a set of conclusions. It is a process. And the process requires that we remain open to evidence that challenges what we thought we knew, however uncomfortable that challenge might be. If you came to this documentary as a skeptic, we hope the evidence gave you something to think about. If you came as a true believer, we hope the critical examination gave you a more nuanced picture. The truth, as always, lies in the evidence, not in what we want to be true. Thank you for watching. If this investigation sparked your curiosity, please subscribe to the channel. We publish new documentaries every week, covering the full range of historical mysteries that the mainstream has not yet adequately explained. Leave a comment below telling us which case you want us to investigate next. The conversation continues. The investigation never ends.